On today's show, OKC gets back in the win column. Plus, we'll take a look at who the midseason MVP, midseason title favorites are, and we'll give who our reserves for the Eastern and Western Conference in terms of all-stars would be on today's edition of Locked On NBA Game Night.
When that final buzzer rings, you know it's time for Locked On NBA Game Night. All the post-game reactions to every game across the league, every single night, with insights only the hosts at Locked On can provide. It's the true NBA fans' one stop for all the action. Every game, every night. It's Locked On NBA Game Night. Tipping off now.
What's up, everybody? I'm Danny Cunningham, host of Locked On Cavs. He's Swipa, host of Locked On Nuggets. We're here to bring you thoughts from every NBA game from January 26th, which there was only one of them, as Oklahoma City played Portland. We'll get to that, but first, thank you for making Locked On NBA Game Night your first listen today and every day. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Also available on YouTube. Make sure you give us a thumbs up there. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell as well. A proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Locked On also has a newsletter introducing the Locked On Daily Newsletter, your one-stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at lockedondaily.com. Swipe OKC in Portland, the only game of the day on Sunday. OKC gets back in the win column with a 118-108 win. I do want to talk a little bit about Portland first, because with the conversation we're going to have about who should be the midseason MVP, who should be the title favorite right now that we're halfway through the season, we're going to talk about OKC a lot. But Portland came into this game, they had won their previous four. They look much more like a real NBA team than I think they did earlier on in the season. I'm starting to see some things that I like from them in terms of Scoot Henderson looking better. Denny Advia had a really good game. Just like this team looks like a real basketball team at this point.
You know what? I think that one of the more underrated stories of this season has been Toumani Camara. He has actually blossomed over this year, and he's had some really, really interesting stretches this season. You know, I think he doesn't get a lot of, I would say, national acclaim just because he's kind of lost in the little wheelhouse in Portland because they're rebuilding. You know, they're trying to figure out their identity. They're trying to figure out exactly who they are, how they want to play, like all those things. But he's been good, man. Like, I really love how they're working him into their rotation and how they're allowing him to continue to flourish. And, you know, for me, like the most important player on this roster is probably is Denny Advia. I think he's incredible. Like, I truly love how engaged he is defensively. Even watching the stretch of this game, you know, just even the three-pointer he was able to hit, like in the clutch over a contested linked arm. Like, I just love the way that he continues to grow his game, expand his game. When he was with Washington, he was known as like more of a primary wing defender who has some offensive shot, but now he's really developing some good playmaking skills. He's showing some real scoring value in this league. And I think that, you know, who knows, like as he continues to develop, like he doesn't have like all-star level like skills or anything like that. But I do think this is a dude that, like, you know, let's see, Portland wants to keep him, cool. But that is a player that a lot of contenders should be looking at. I don't know if you know this, Danny, but he's averaging just this month alone 18 points, 8.5 rebounds. He's averaging 4 assists, 1.6 steals, and he's shooting 50% from the field, 31 from three, 71 from the line. But he's basically been like a plus in almost every game this month. And they're playing well when he's on the court. And especially given how good he is defensively, if he was on a more competent team, I think he would be getting a lot more love for just how good and unique his skill set is. But like, again, I don't know if Portland's willing to do it, but you better believe if I was a contender, I absolutely be willing to throw some picks and some money their way for Denny.
I do wonder what the cost would be for him on the trade market. Against OKC had 28, 8 and 8 was a +4 in a game that they lost by 10. Really, Portland starters were not the issue. It was the bench that got really destroyed for the Blazers. All their starters were in the positive. Kamara, to your point, he had 24 points. He made all 5 threes that he took. But Avdia was awesome in this. He looks to me, and I think this is kind of the nicest thing that I could say about a player that is not going to be a star player, because I don't think he's there, but someone in that situation, he looks to me like somebody that should be getting minutes on a team that's capable of winning the title. Like that's a high compliment that I can give to him, despite the fact that he's playing in a Portland team that is in early-ish stages of the rebuild still.
And then if you look at his contract, 15.6 this year, 14.3 next year, 13.1, 11.87. He has a D scaling contract that will make him more affordable as time goes on. And guess what? He has 3 more years after this. I mean, again, maybe one of the most valuable contracts in the league. Don't know if somebody can actually afford him. But, man, I watch him play, and I'm just like, that's a dude that could legit be getting rotational minutes on the championship team and be playing winning basketball right now. Like, for instance, if he played on the Thunder, we'll talk about the Thunder here in a little bit. I mean, they would be even more stacked than what they are. You know, if he played for teams – for teams like Denver,
they're a team that could afford
Cleveland,
him. Right.
100%. 100%.
I don't know. I don't know that Portland should be looking to give up him, though. Like, that's the other aspect of this, too, because that contract is, one, a very affordable deal. It's a really friendly deal to have on the books, but also it's not as if he's going to age out of Portland's process. By time, the way that I look at players that teams could be trading when they're in the rebuilding process, the question that always pops in my mind is, what's the likelihood of that player being on the roster the next time you win a playoff series? And because of obvious contracts, like, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. He could be in the last year of that deal when the Blazers win a playoff series, depending on how things go. So that leads to me, if I'm running the Blazers, which I'm not, but I wouldn't necessarily want to part with that piece.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, we'll see. I like the way the Blazers are playing. I like the direction they're going in. Donovan Clingan, I think it's going to be a good player in this league. You add Scoot Henderson's continued development. You got Denny on the roster. Hey, I think they got a nice floor. Obviously, Shaedon Sharp, definitely want to include him. Anthony Simons has shown some good moments in the league. They have enough players, I think, where you can have a vision for where they're going as a unit.
All right, so let's get into the Thunder, but first let's hear from Locked On Thunder host Rylan Stiles.
Win ugly, then lose pretty, and the Thunder took care of business against Portland. It got dicey a couple times. Portland went on a run in the fourth quarter, made it about an 8-point game, but it ended up not really mattering at all as the Thunder had a massive talent disparity. SGA drops 30 points again. It's just what he does. Isaiah Hartenstein comes back, has a really big game. Good to see the Thunder getting healthy. Good to see the Thunder winning on the road. And now they had 2 days off before this game. They get 2 days off after this game. They can start to recuperate a little bit after a grueling part of their schedule. It's all coming up Thunder so far this week.
So OKC with the win, they moved to 37-8 on this season. Should they be considered the favorite to win the title in June?
Best of course for me. I think that by the public, by the consensus, 100%, they should be considered the favorite to win the title. We talked about this a little bit offline, but one thing I wanted to look up today just to confirm, make sure that I knew I was talking about. So right now, if you look at overall team net ratings in NBA history, currently the Bulls, they have in the 1995-1996 season, have the number 1 net rating of all time, a plus 13.4. They were an elite offense, and then they were a elite defense that season. The Thunder a plus 12.3 in the 2024-25 season. That is the literal second best net rating ever. Now, will it stand? Will it stay? Who knows? But then the people they're surrounded by, the Bulls in 95-96, the Bulls in 96-97 at 3, the Warriors in 16-17 with Kevin Durant, I mind you, at 11.6. The Celtics last year when they won the title 16-3 through the playoffs at 11.6. The Spurs in 15-16 who won 67 games at 11.3. And then you got the title Celtics at 11.2 in 07-08. And then you got the Bulls again, the Bucks, and then the Warriors. Like, these are not sleeper teams. These are elite teams that either won championships or were outliers and did not win championships due to other teams also being great in that same season. So I think the Thunder deserve to be considered that. And on top of that, I think, again, I've said this multiple times, there's 2 units, I think, in basketball that in a half-court setting that are unstoppable, near unstoppable. One, I think, is the OKC Thunder defense. They have, at all times, when they're healthy, Alex Caruso, Lou Dort, Cason Wallace, SGA, Isaiah Hartenstein, Chet Holmgren when he comes back, and they have Jalen Williams. They are at all times going to be able to deploy anywhere from 4 to 7 to 8 very good to elite defenders all at one time who play on a string, who are very aggressive, and who are consistently attacking the ball. And I believe if things have held over the last week or so, last time I looked it up, they were leading the NBA in steal percentage as a unit in double digits. They had a double-digit steal percentage. That is outrageous. So to have that kind of team, I think they should easily be considered the favorite to win the title in the NBA.
So they are so far and away the best team in basketball right now. And you brought up the having an elite level defense, which obviously they do. Their defensive rating after this game is 103.9, according to NBA.com. Second place, which obviously, like, that is elite. That is an incredible defense. I know the numbers might not look the same as they did with the Bulls because we're just in a different era of basketball. You can't compare that. But second place is the Clippers at 107.2. So that's a pretty sizable gap between 1 and 2. Like, that is the same gap essentially between the Clippers at 2 and the Wolves at 7. And then you go to net rating, plus 12.3, second all time. The Cavs are second at plus 9.1. That is the same difference between the Cavs at 2 and the Houston Rockets at number 6. OKC is not just elite. They are all-time dominant, all-time great. They should be the favorites, in my opinion. It is interesting. I'm curious when the sports books are going to catch up, because right now they still have Boston. FanDuel still has Boston as the favorites at plus 220. OKC is right behind them at plus 230. And I think there's a conversation to be had, and I do want to talk about this a little bit next right here. But I think OKC's route to getting to the NBA Finals is a little bit easier, and I think that should be baked in there a little bit too. So we'll do that next. Plus, going to talk about who should be the MVP favorites right now at the midpoint of the season right here on Locked On NBA Game Night. Today's episode is brought to you by Rocket RX. If you're ready to boost your confidence and take control in the bedroom, Rocket RX has the solution. Imagine feeling more prepared and performing at your best. Rocket RX makes it simple and stress-free. Rocket RX offers FDA-approved treatments for erectile dysfunction at a lower cost than branded alternatives. No more uncomfortable doctor visits or pharmacy trips. Everything's delivered straight to your door in discreet, plain packaging. With Rocket RX, you'll get trusted care from a real U.S. clinical team. Complete a quick 100% online consultation, and you could get your free prescription today. Visit rocketrx.com to get started now. It only takes 2 minutes. Right now, our listeners can get 40% off your first order when you use code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDON NBA. That's rocketrx.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for 40% off your first order. Terms and conditions do apply. Rocket RX, better sex made simple. Thank you again for making Locked On NBA Game Night your first listen today and every day. You can find us anywhere you get your podcasts and YouTube as well, talking about how elite OKC is. And I do think that when I look at this, when I look at why part of the reason why they should be the favorites to win the title this year is I think there are 5 teams that are capable of winning the title. And it's weird because I think the team actually with the best chance to beat OKC is not one of those teams in the Dallas Mavericks. But I think you look at OKC, you look at Denver in the West, and then in the East, I think it's Cleveland, Boston, and maybe New York. So I think part of that should be the reason why we should look at them is their path might be a little bit easier than whoever comes out of the East just getting to the finals.
Why would you think it would be easier?
Because I think that the chances they have to play 2 teams capable of winning the title is less out West than it is in the East. I think if whoever finishes second or third, I think it's going to be much more difficult in the East. Like if Boston has to play New York and Cleveland, I think that's a tougher road than OKC. Really, I think Dallas could scare them, and I think Denver is capable of winning the title. But out there, I don't know that there's another great team.
I think that's interesting. So the Knicks, I actually don't think will push. Well, I mean, it just depends. Everything depends on matchups. Everything depends on their defense. Obviously, we'll have to see it. I think the Knicks have a concept. I think Knicks fans should feel good that they have a team that could possibly win the title, like 100%, or at least push for a title. I think Jalen Brunson's a great player. I think Karl-Anthony Towns having his best year. I think their defense, there's a structure that should work, even though it hasn't necessarily lived up to expectations so far. But I think the issue is that OKC, they're in the first round right now. They would have to play, looks like the Dallas Mavericks currently. And let's just pretend in a world that Dallas has Luka and Kyrie and Derek Lively by the mid-April when the playoffs start. So after winning the play-in, after getting the number 1 overall seed, they would have to play a team that they struggled the most against in a regular season and playoff setting in the last year and a half and 2 seasons now. Luka would be fully healthy. Kyrie would be there available. PJ Washington, who just had 20 and 19 versus that team with no Luka on the court, and they won again. Obviously, Isaiah Hartenstein did not play and Chet didn't play. I think that would be a horrific first-round matchup, given that they earned the opportunity to have the number 1 overall seed. That is a team that could beat them. Now, would I pick Dallas to beat them? Not necessarily. But if you also told me that Luka feels good, that his body's good, no lower extremity issues anymore, and now he's able to go into this game confident, well, they're going to feel like they got the best player in the series. Now, OKC might feel that way, but Dallas definitely will. And Kyrie, you know what? Kyrie didn't have a good series versus them last year, so maybe he had another advantage, but PJ Washington had a good series. Derek Lively and Gafford will present a lot of issues. They'll be able to respond to Chet and Isaiah on the interior. That would still be tough, but I'll see. I still think, and I also think, I talked about this before. I think Denver could also beat OKC in the series, but I think OKC could beat Denver in the series as well. So that will be a fun series regardless. But yeah, I mean, it really depends on how people feel about Cleveland. Do you think Cleveland's going to hold on and kind of maintain who they've been in a regular season setting, or do you think when they get in the half court playoff setting, who's going to be a player that can consistently get a stop and consistently score on the perimeter, when they need it?
So I think the thing that should worry people about Cleveland is actually their defense, because that's been what's been super inconsistent. And I look at a lot of the things they do offensively that I think should make fans believe they're going to be really good on offense in the postseason. Take their game on Saturday night, for example, against Houston, where Houston's a really good defense. They're not OKC level good, but they're a really good defense too. And the Rockets scored 135 points in that game, which meant they got to set their defense quite a bit. Like the Cavs didn't get a ton of transition opportunities because they weren't getting stops at the other end. And the Cavs still put up 131 points against a really good defense. Like they have so many different options. And that was in a game. It was Evan Mobley's first game back from a calf injury. He was not in rhythm. And the Cavs don't look good right now because they're not good on defense, but they're still able to score with anybody. Like, I don't think that's going to be an issue. They're great in the half court. They're great in transition. For me, with them, it's going to come down to, can they get enough stops? Can they get back to being the really good defensive team they had been the previous 2 years, with the roster really not changing as much? But offensively, I don't have a ton of concerns about them.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see for sure. I think their offense has been elite. They've had the number 1 offense in the league all year almost, and then especially even as of late. So we'll see. But yeah, their defense has been an issue on the perimeter. Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland. But again, Okoro also has been like in and out of the lineup. So they're trying to figure some things out. Evan Mobley wasn't there. But overall, I think OKC should be the favorite. And then if I had to kind of throw it your way, Danny, in terms of just even thinking through, like, what would be the reason why OKC doesn't make the title, or maybe doesn't win the title this year?
So I think the reason would have to be their offense isn't good enough in the playoffs. Like I do think, because, and it's not a weakness, like they're 6th in the NBA in offense, but they're not elite in offense. They're really good in offense. And I think that if they struggle to score in the half court, they're going to win games in the postseason where they hold teams under 100 points. I would bet they're probably going to win 5 or 6 of those when the postseason gets here. But if a team gets hot, and you look at Dallas as the example, for whatever reason, that Mavericks team, even when they're not healthy, has the formula against OKC. I think that would be the reason why they don't win the title, is if they just run into a matchup that, whatever reason, that other team can break down OKC's defense, and outside of Shea and maybe Jalen Williams, they don't have enough options or enough diversity offensively. Now, that said, we've not seen them play a game with both Chet Holmgren and Isaiah Hartenstein together. Like, I don't know what their offense is going to look like when they are fully healthy, because we've never seen it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it would be their shooting 100% that they go cold. My friend Ryan Blackburn from Lockdown Nuggets and Mile High Sports has brought up the past several champions. All of them are top 3 in the NBA in effective field goal percentage, because scoring, especially in half court, becomes like the most important thing in sports. But again, like, if you look at kind of how the team is performing this year with OKC, one of the things that they're not doing well is finishing. Right now in the NBA per dunks and threes, the best 3 shooting teams in the league are the Cleveland Cavaliers at a 58.7% effective field goal percentage, the Denver Nuggets at a 56.9% effective field goal percentage, and then the New York Knicks at a 56.8%. OKC, They're actually all the way down at 12 at 54.8. And again, shot conversion is where that kind of comes from overall, like your true 3-point, 2-point shot conversion. So yeah, I mean, that easily could be the thing that drops them. But again, I think their defense might just be good enough that it may not end up mattering. And Shea by himself might be able to lift them to a title.
Right. And they are so, if they were just like, this is going to sound crazy, if they were just like regular level elite, like if they had the Clippers defense, which is, I think, an elite defense right now.
Yeah.
I don't think I would feel the way I feel about them as being title favorites. But because their defense is, again, these numbers are all relative to era, but their defense is one of the best I think we've ever seen, considering the era that they're playing basketball in. If it wasn't that, I think I'd feel differently, but they're so good on that end. They're so elite on that end. It's hard for me to be like, well, they definitely need to be better offensively. I think if they're, just really, really good offensively and what they are defensively, they're capable of winning it. I do want to talk MVP because I think it's a 2-horse race. I think we probably agree there. I want to know who you think should be the favorite to win the MVP award. We're going to do that next right here on Lockdown NBA. If you're watching the show on YouTube, do me a favor, hit that thumbs up button for me, click subscribe, hit that notification bell as well. And right now, swipe a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, the favorite to win MVP by FanDuel Sportsbook at minus, I believe, 230 odds right now. Nikola Jokic, Denver Nuggets, number 2. I think those are really the only 2 guys in consideration. Where do you lean as of right now, a little bit past the midway point in this season?
Yeah, so that was actually an interesting question, and I've thought about this a lot. Now, if you look at the Basketball Reference MVP award tracker, all it does is a model that they use based on previous voting results. Jokic right now is a favorite with a 68.3% probability to win the MVP this year. And then Shai is second at a 23.3. Now, again, this is just based on like statistical models that were based on previous voting habits. Now, the stuff that I've always looked at for MVP stuff is how you're performing in impact metrics, how the team is performing on the court. The team with Shai on the court, they're like a plus 17.5 this year, which is incredible. The Nuggets are a plus 11.9 right now with Jokic that dropped after the Minnesota Timberwolves game. The Denver Nuggets are performing as the best offense in NBA history when Jokic is on the court. Their defense is also better when he's on the court this year. Shai, they're performing at an elite defense. Their offense is also performing elite when he's on the court as well. But when you look at like win shares per 48, what that typically measures is how it's estimating the number of wins you contribute by a player from a 48-minute basis. Jokic is leading the NBA by a 0.3.28, and that's just shy of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's all-time record at a 3.36 or 0.336. And Shai is second in the NBA at a 0.313. And just for context, why that's important, if you look at the last several MVP seasons from Joker, they're all around a 0.313 or less than that. Like, Shai is having one of the greatest guard years of all time. And any other normal MVP level season, Shai would be the clear front runner, and there wouldn't really be much discussion. Even Jokic last year at 26, 12, and 9 in the second seed, second seed, 57 wins, tied with OKC. The reason why I lean Joker this year is because right now, Danny, Joker is having statistically the greatest offensive season in NBA history. And that's not hyperbole. Like, they're leading the best.
He's incredible.
Yeah, they're leading the best offense in the NBA when he is on the court this year. That's one. But also, in NBA history, we've never, ever seen in the entire league of the sport a player average a 30-point triple-double, and he, while doing that, averaging 13 rebounds a game. They're also averaging 10.1 assists. He's averaging 1.8 steals a game. He's shooting 57% from the field, 48% from 3, 81 from the line on a 65.5 true shooting. And literally, what you're experiencing is unprecedented. Like, there's never been a greater collection of individual play on the offensive end ever. And it's also leading to wins. The Nuggets are performing as a high-end 57-win team around that when he's played this year. So I just think that typically the way I work, Danny, I think about Michael Jordan, I think about LeBron James, I think about all-time greats. I've always leaned the award goes to the best player playing in the season that year, regardless of where the team finishes. Michael Jordan won a MVP in, I think it was 1987, if I remember correctly, when his team won 50 games. He finished ahead of Bird, and Bird, I think, won 7 more games than him that year. But his play was just spectacular. And I think that's just kind of where I am. I think the best player in the league that year, whoever's the most impactful player, that should be the one that gets the MVP. I think our modern metrics have leaned that way. The only year Joker hasn't won in the last 4 or 5 years now is the year he was the number 1 overall seed. And they had a 7-game lead in the Western Conference at the top of the month of March, but Embiid as a 3 seed in the Eastern Conference ended up winning that award. So we've seen things kind of flip to like what most valuable is. And, I told you, I think before the show started, Kendrick Perkins before the Minnesota Timberwolves Denver Nuggets game, he outright said that Nikola Jokic is the best player in the world, but he's not the most valuable player in the world. And for me, that's like a true oxymoron. I just don't believe those two things can be separate.
So I do think he's the best player in the world, and I don't think that there's a wrong answer to this question because you look at, Jokic, the season he's having is incredible, but I also do wonder at what point do you weigh team success into this? Because I do think winning matters, and it's not as if we're talking about Jokic playing on a team like the Thunder of the year Russell Westbrook won it, where that was like he averaged a triple-double that year. He was really, really good, but it was also Kevin Durant left him and the team didn't totally go in the tank because of it, because Russ was so good. But then I also look at, well, what OKC's doing is historic. Like, they are a team that has a chance to win 67, 68 games. They are a team that has a chance to be potentially the greatest net rating team of all time. I think it'd be, I don't think they're going to get there, but like, that is, you can't rule that out as of right now. And we're recording this on January 27th. So that's pretty impressive just in itself. And it's not as if Shea's numbers, you brought up how he's second to Jokic in a lot of those advanced stats. He's on the season averaging 32, 5, and 6 on 53, 35, 90 splits. So he's been incredible offensively. You could probably make the case that he's better defensively too than Jokic. I don't think that's,
of course,
like,
that's not even a question. Yeah.
I don't think that's the biggest deal in MVP voting. Like, I don't look at the MVP as, oh, this guy's just a lockdown defender. Like, they have another award for that Shea's not going to win and doesn't deserve to win. But he is, like, if you want to, if you got to pick a tie somewhere, like, maybe that's it. I'm somebody that if you are the best player on the best team, like, I don't like that. Just, I feel like that's kind of lazy doing that. But I don't think that this is just the best team. I think this could be a historic team. And I think that kind of changes things just a little bit for me. So I would lean Shea here. And a good chunk of it has to do with, one, he's been the best player on that team, but that team is doing things that we haven't really seen been done in a long, long time. And I think that matters in my argument.
Yeah, I actually would, to go further on that, I actually think one of the better kind of MVP argument for Shea, it goes beyond best player, best team, because even when I hear that, I know that by itself, Celtics fans will feel a mighty interesting way, because last year they were the 5th best regular season team ever per net rating, and Jason Tatum was 6th in MVP voting. So clearly there has to be something about the way you're actually playing basketball. Shea Gilgeous-Alexander is playing better basketball than Tatum did last year on a 60-plus win team, than Devin Booker did on a 64-win team, and Chris Paul did on a 57-plus win team. So he is like performing like Giannis did on number 1 overall seeds. Now, maybe not as good as Giannis, like those 19, 20 years when I think they were on pace to win 60 games, 18, 19, they won 60 games. Giannis won MVP. You could maybe not that good, but overall, man, like, I think standalone, regardless of record, Shea has an impeccable case. And if he wins MVP, he will deserve MVP because his individual play has been exemplary of what a most valuable player is. And on top of that, what he does have working with him is the narrative. Last year, they were the number 1 seed.
Right.
This year, they're the number 1 seed. He's not won an MVP. We haven't seen a guard win an MVP since 17-18 with James Harden. And then on top of that, like, Joker's already won 3. And one thing that Kendrick Perkins said who was a voter prior to the game versus the Wolves, is he said out of his mouth verbatim, Nikola Jokic, the MVP conversation is beneath Nikola Jokic at this point, because now everything is about winning more titles. Everything is about solidifying his case as an all-time great. And that's funny because now we moved into this place where Joker is no longer chasing Joker. Joker is now chasing Jordan. And I think that's where we are. It's like Joker is now moved into this place where he needs to be looking towards, how do I catch LeBron? How do I catch Magic? How do I catch Kareem? That's at least how the discourse is changing, because now he needs to add more titles to his already impeccable all-time great resume. And I think that's actually going to help SGA if he does indeed win the MVP, and deservedly so this year.
Right. The narrative is definitely in SGA's side because he hasn't won it. There's no voter fatigue. And I do think that when you get to a certain point, and I don't necessarily think that Jokic is done winning MVPs, but it's one of those things where he didn't win his third MVP until after he won a title, correct? That was the year after, because the year they won the number 1 overall seed, I believe he had 2 in the back pocket, but didn't win a title, and then they won a title, and then he got another MVP the next year. And I think that if he adds another title, if he puts another trophy in that trophy case in Denver, maybe then you see, okay, it's time to give this guy another one. He belongs in the rarefied air in NBA history of guys who have 4 MVPs, because it's not a long list. But until he wins a second title, or maybe even a third title, I don't know how all the voters are going to feel about that. Not saying that every voter thinks like that, because that's not true, but some of them certainly might. Okay, before we get out of here, though, do you want to run through the East and West All-Star reserves that we've written down quickly? Who do you have? So the Eastern starters that were named this past week: Donovan Mitchell, Jalen Brunson, Jason Tatum, Karl Anthony Towns, Giannis Antetokounmpo. Who are the 7 reserves that you have?
So Eastern Conference reserves: Darius Garland. I don't know how people are not saying more about Darius Garland this year. Trae Young, Evan Mobley, I think deserves that bid as well. I got Cade Cunningham. Think I had Damian Lillard. Another player that I had in there that I thought about is Tyler Hero. I don't really know. I struggled with the bigs because I think Bam typically would be in that spot, but I really truly don't love the way that Bam has played this year, so I kind of opted out of that. But I actually gave another spot to Tyler Hero. I think people are just like really sleeping on how good he's been this year, and I wanted to put Trae Young on there as well. So those are my reserves.
So I went Evan Mobley, Jaylen Brown. My third front court player.
My goodness.
Well, so the way it works, they have to have 3 front court players, and it gets real thin real fast, because the guys in Orlando, Franz and Paolo, have both played like all-stars, but they haven't played enough for me to be like, yeah, they should be in the all-star game. Paolo's played in 12 or 13 games, and Franz missed 6 weeks. Like, it's hard for me to do that. Did the same thing with Luka in the Western Conference, because he's only played 22 games. Like, I don't have him down, not because he's not an all-star, not because he's not good enough, but because he hasn't played enough. Darius Garland, I think you can make the case that Darius Garland has been the best player on the Cavs.
100%. Like, yeah,
I think that is a legitimate argument that can be made.
Danny, I don't know if you watch the Cavs at all, but I definitely do. He's been the most important player. If not the best, he's been the most important player on that team.
I have Cade Cunningham, who's been awesome in Detroit, Damian Lillard, Trae Young. If I could squeeze Tyler Hero in as the front court player, like, he would be my next one. I don't think Bam has been. I don't think he's been an all-star caliber. I don't think Jarrett Allen necessarily should be an all-star. I think it's really close, but I think there's a case to be made maybe for Pascal Siakam, maybe Jalen Johnson too. Like, I think those are the guys that are in that conversation there.
Sure. Western Conference reserves for me: Anthony Edwards. I had to adjust this a little bit. So Anthony Edwards is there. I think there's an argument for Kyrie Irving to be there this year as well.
I have him, man. I have Kyrie.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens, like with D-Book and all that. But I think Kyrie. I have DeMontis. This is not even a question for me. Like, the question's been DeMontis or Şengün for me all year. DeMontis has been incredible. Anthony Davis, Victor Wembanyama. I think J-Dub, Jalen Williams is going to get in this year, and then Jaren Jackson Jr.
So I had the same list, except I had Şengün over Sabonis. It's hard for me to look at what the Rockets have done, the number 2 seed in the West, and not have an all-star. And I think he's been their best player all year. Like, it's really hard for me to do that.
Yeah, I'm award level of play. I think that's the thing. Like, I strictly think through level of play, and to me, there's just not a conversation. Like, Sabonis has been a better offensive player. He's having a better defensive year this year than really maybe ever before, especially as of late. Once Doug Christie kind of took over the unit and they kind of changed up what they were doing a little bit, and Keon Ellis has been on the court more. But in terms of initiating, creating, he's been a better scorer than Şengün this year. Şengün has been missing layups and floaters all season. He has a negative true shooting this year at a center. Like, there's just like I'm saying, like that's just too much for me. I think they deserve credit. They're going to have players on the all defense list. I think Amin Thompson makes all defense this year. I think Şengün deserves some all defense votes for how well he's played this year. But I couldn't do it. Ime Udoka gets coach of the year vote, so for sure.
Oh, for sure. He absolutely deserves to be in that conversation. I mean, I had an up close look at the Rockets on Saturday night, man. Amin Thompson, I could not be more impressed with him. Like, if he figures out his shot, he's going to be a superstar. If he doesn't, he's going to be really, really good. But if he figures out that jumper, man, he's going to be a superstar for a long time in this league.
Mm-hmm.
I could not be more impressed with them. But thank you for making Locked On NBA Game Night your first listen today, making it your first listen every day. If you want to hear more from Swipe It, check out Locked On Nuggets. Does a great job there. If you want to hear more from me for whatever reason, check out Locked On Cavs, where I cover that team every single day. And Locked On NBA Game Night, we'll be back tomorrow talking about all the games on Monday, but don't miss Locked On NBA coming your way a little bit later this afternoon, talking about everything going on in the NBA.